This leads me to the seventh objection to opening the churches. That if the government does turn against the church and begins to blatantly persecute us because of the leeway we have given it for the purpose of solving this emergency, we can always appeal through peaceful legal means to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to maintain and protect our right to freedom of religious expression. However, this objection not only undermines the objector's strongest argument, in terms of the argument against churches opening that has the most scriptural support, although still completely unbiblical, namely that Christians are to submit to the governing authorities, since any illegal appeal to the Constitution would be to challenge the government for the church's right to resist their authority. Moreover, this too would be to acquiesce in part or in whole to the notion that in-person gathering is essential to the Christian because it is commanded by Christ in Hebrews 10:25. Moreover, the objectors to opening the church that are taking this wait-and-see approach and holding the legal means by which to challenge these lockdowns in their back pocket risk doing so in vain. This is because, as we spoke about a couple weeks ago when we discussed the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, there are two criteria that are used to establish a violation of our right to freedom of religious expression. With the Charter reading, an infringement of Section 2A of the Charter will be made out where the claimant sincerely believes in a belief or practice that has a nexus with religion, and the impugned measure interferes with that claimant's ability to act in accordance with his or her religious beliefs in a manner that is more than trivial or insubstantial. Thus, if the church continues to remain closed and content with technology bridging the gap between church leaders and Christ's flock, they are eroding the fact that in-person gatherings are essential to the Christian faith and commanded by Christ in Hebrews 10:25, and thus they are removing their ability to appeal in a legal manner to the Constitution that any such restrictions on our ability to gather by the government is actually an infringement of a Christian's right to freedom of religious expression, as the government will simply argue using the words of Christian leaders during this pandemic that in-person gathering is not essential to the Christian faith. Thus, the church currently is risking setting a dangerous precedent, both now during this pandemic and into the future, as by keeping churches closed, this opens the door for the government to legally restrict in-person church gatherings, both during this pandemic as well as whenever it should see fit in the future, regardless of circumstances, without it being a violation of our charter rights. Lastly, it must be understood that one of the key elements that the Supreme Court considers when Canadians appeal to the Constitution to overturn what they view as an unconstitutional law is how narrow is the law's effect on Canadian society. In other words, does the law only affect those filing the legal grievance, or does it affect multiple groups in society beyond the group filing the legal grievance? With the greater the scope of the law's effect on Canadian society, the less likely the Supreme Court is to overturn it as unconstitutional for a small group, even if it is a clear violation of our charter rights. Thus, it is critical that churches organize and open together, open loudly, and open broadly across all of Canada, just as 500-plus businesses did in defiance of the government lockdowns on February 11, 2021, to demonstrate that not only are these lockdowns a violation of our charter rights, but overturning these unconstitutional laws is the will of the people as a whole in Canada. Since again, in Western society, because we have the right to vote, and we do not yet live in a police state, political will, not laws, are what will ultimately determine government decision and actions.
You've been listening to the Good is Done podcast. Check out more of the show on demand at anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Castbox, Pocket Casts, SoundCloud, YouTube, or wherever podcasts are found. Also connect with and follow LNCB on Facebook, Parler, and Twitter, at Good is Done Podcast.